After the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan, what are the regional implications? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. After 20 years of a US military presence in Afghanistan and the recent Taliban takeover, there are many questions now about how this will also impact countries in the region. Meanwhile, life has changed significantly for Afghans in the country and around the world. We begin with this report from CGTN's Andrew Wilson.
This is a new dawn for the people of Afghanistan. Welcome or not, life is now different. But already the streets of Kabul have resumed their daily rhythm. There are different eyes watching over the people now, but their message is one of reassurance. I have 200 people with me, says this Taliban commander. I'm responsible for them, and we are here to protect the people's property, honor and dignity, and of course, provide security. Those shopkeepers that spoke to the cameras were generally positive about the Taliban presence and its immediate effect on street crime. But there are also deep concerns about the pressures on the economy now deprived of foreign aid. The banks are struggling with cash flow, and the currency, the Afghani, is falling fast, and money traders are refusing to handle it. Taliban patrols have moved into the airport, scene of so much chaos and violence in the past weeks. Now just the physical debris remains. What the Americans couldn't take, they destroyed. And Taliban commanders were able to brief their troops at a fence which until 2 days ago was patrolled by NATO troops. But there's more political celebration too. In the city of Host, close to the border with Pakistan, crowds staged a mock funeral for the departed forces, carrying coffins draped with their national flags through the streets. At a military airbase in Qatar, the last of the American transporters has touched down, delivering those who cleared the closing checkpoints to a new staging post. From there, it's almost certainly, for these people, on to the United States. But in Serbia, almost at the European Union, a group of Afghans lines up for their daily meal in a holding center. Many of these people have been on the road for months. They're stranded, having made their way through Iran and Turkey overland. Their days are filled with anxious calls to family members left behind at home. They don't believe the Taliban has changed.
They're gonna target those people who work with government. They're telling them that no problem, come to your jobs, continue living normal, but no, that's not the case. Things are going different, in a different way. So, yeah, I'm so worried about that.
Yes, the Taliban announced amnesty, but still people scared that they worked, because if you work for foreign countries, you are considered as a threat to the Taliban, or you are considered as maybe a traitor, something like that.
The war may be officially declared over, but it has a lot more damage to do before the door is finally closed. Andrew Wilson, CGTN.
We have a lot to discuss. Let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Beijing is Victor Gao. He is the chair professor at Beijing's Soochow University. Here in Washington, D.C., Anton Fedyashin is an associate professor at American University. From Detroit, Michigan, we are joined by Saeed Khan. He is a lecturer of Near East and Asian Studies at Wayne State University. And from London, Zardasht Shams is the former deputy head of mission at the Embassy of Afghanistan in Islamabad, Pakistan. Welcome to all of you to the show. And Zardasht Shams, let me start with you. Great to have you with us on the show. The Taliban are now in charge. The clerical leadership held a meeting in Kandahar, we understand, and they are expected to announce a government on Friday. What are your hopes for that government and indeed for the country?
Thank you so much, Anand. I believe that this is now the challenging part for Taliban, because though on the battlefield, whatever happened, they became successful in capturing almost all Afghanistan except the Panjshir province. But now the real test starts when what sort of government they have told about the inclusive system of government. So all Afghans are eagerly waiting for Taliban what they will present. And as long as we know that the Taliban people are not much optimistic, because from their history, from their background, it's not that easy that they will include other Afghans, non-Taliban Afghans, political elites. But even then, people are hopeful that the transition, the final transition, particularly in Kabul, was peaceful. So now it's really a test time for Taliban to show what sort of government they are going to give to the Afghan people.
Right, Zardasht, there are people who are not optimistic, as you point out, about the new government, but there are also those who say, look, give them a chance. This is not the Taliban of old. This is a new Taliban. And they have been talking about an inclusive government of more moderate policies. Are you encouraged by that?
To some extent, because Taliban, as we see that the statements so far they have made are quite positive, but we have to see what exactly in action whether they prove it or not. Like they're meeting with the previous political leaders like the former President Karzai, Dr. Abdullah, and other elites. But recently, the Taliban leadership have indicated that those who worked in the past cabinets, in the past governments, will not be part of the government. Though I'm sure that former President Karzai or other political leaders will also not be willing to be part of the government. But even then, like the broader political leadership, the political elites, the other ethnic minorities, and other ideological groups, whether they will be part of the government. So these are the points that people are looking for Taliban to prove it or to show it what sort of government arrangement they will bring it to Afghanistan.
Victor Gar, as I said in the introduction, this is also about the impact on the region. It's been less than a week since the United States retreat from Afghanistan. Countries in the region are still assessing the impact of that. This is what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman had to say. Let's listen.
China sincerely hopes that all Afghan parties will respond to the urgent wishes of their own people and the general expectations of the international community, build an open and inclusive political structure, pursue a moderate and stable domestic and foreign policy, and make a clean break with all terrorist organizations, and to live in harmony with all countries in the world, especially neighboring countries.
So, Victor, listening to the Foreign Ministry spokesman there, the Chinese position appears to be very much in line with what we've been hearing here in Washington from the White House. Is that a fair assessment? They're on the same page when it comes to what they want.
Well, indeed, I think we are on the threshold of potential profound changes and developments in Afghanistan, which may generate, and depending on which direction it may take, it may generate tremendous amount of impact on the neighboring countries, including China and China's Xinjiang region. And I think right now we need to give the Taliban government the benefit of doubt, at least in the coming days or weeks, to urge them to do the right thing. And I think the Chinese foreign minister said exactly the right thing for this particular moment in history for the Taliban leaders. And we all wish them well and do the right thing. And we also urge them to avoid doing anything which may be a repeat of what Taliban was before 20 years ago. So let's give them the best hope, but also let's keep our eyes very open to listen to what they have to say and to watch what they have to do.
Victor, does China have any red lines?
See your question again?
Yes, Victor, I was asking, does China have any red lines when it comes to the kind of government that will be established in Afghanistan?
Absolutely. I think China has made it very clear. China will not tolerate Afghanistan to be used by any terrorist groups to constitute a threat to legitimate Chinese interests. And China has urged the Taliban to sever completely its connections or relations with any terrorist group, international or domestic, because otherwise, if Taliban does not make that dramatic change, Afghanistan may become another hotspot of terrorism, radicalization, and extremism, constituting a major threat to the legitimate interest of countries like China, especially infiltrating into China's Xinjiang province, which borders with Afghanistan. That's the red line for China, and I think the Chinese people are completely behind the Chinese government in urging Taliban leaders and Taliban government to do the right thing and to avoid Afghanistan to become another hotbed of terrorism and extremism and radicalization.
Saeed Khan, one of the most experienced United States diplomats and scholars on the region, Bruce Riedel, he wrote a piece on the website of the think tank, the Brookings Institution, in which he said that, and I'm quoting here, the Taliban victory could have significant consequences for Pakistan, some of it, and these are his words, dangerous and violent. He points to the murky relationship between the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistan Taliban. He also says that another militant group in Pakistan, Lashkar-e-Taiba, will see this as a victory itself. Could there be some kind of blowback for Pakistan? I mean, we've already seen 2 Pakistani soldiers killed on the Afghan border.
There's a possibility of at least 2 different scenarios where this could happen. One is the potential collaboration of ISIS-K with factions within Pakistan, which have then, of course, the ability to destabilize both Afghanistan and Pakistan. The other is the potential destabilization by an influx of refugees into Pakistan, a country which certainly brought in Afghan refugees once before during, of course, the Soviet era from 1979 to 1989. 3 million was the influx, and in fact, that's where the Taliban were essentially born, in the refugee camps of Pakistan. There is the possibility that with another influx, this is something that will cause an already concerned public to feel not only more anxious, but also could add fuel to a further radicalization movement within Pakistan. But of course, the one variable which we always have when it comes to Pakistan is the all-powerful security force, the ISI, which has very close ties to the Taliban and has done a fairly effective job in curbing the potential of the kind of radicalization that, of course, everybody fears could visit Pakistan as well.
So, Saeed, it would appear that Pakistan faces the twin problems that you pointed to. One is a security issue, and the other is a humanitarian issue. Will that be divided between, let's say, the security establishment on the one hand and then the civilian establishment on the other?
Well, and to add a third issue into the mix, of course, is the politicization of both of these issues. It seems as though when it comes to Afghanistan, whether it's in the United States or even in a country like Pakistan, everything is now being seen through the lens of politicization. Imran Khan's government is always in a very delicate and a precarious position. Any statement that he makes is almost immediately contradicted by the political opposition within the country, and any kind of an election cycle is going to be affected by that. The fixed point in Pakistan, of course, then is going to be the ISI, which will handle the security issues irrespective of the political dimensions of the issue. But again, the humanitarian issue is going to loom largely both in the public consciousness as well as in the international community. We already see a lot of pushback on Pakistan, a lot of blame game that Pakistan essentially was responsible for the Taliban, calls from many different officials from different countries for sanctions of Pakistan, without recognizing that in many ways, if there is going to be a humanitarian solution for Afghanistan, it will involve Pakistan, both geographically as well as logistically.
Anton Fedyashin, great to have you on the show. It's been a long time since you've been here. Good to see you. Let's talk about the implications for Russia. In fact, Russian President Vladimir Putin has been talking about what's happened in Afghanistan. He said it's impossible to impose anything from outside. And of course, Russia should know a thing or two. It was in Afghanistan. It had to leave like the United States has left. Putin said the US has tried to impose its norms and standards of life on Afghanistan, and the result is zero, perhaps even negative. Afghanistan is, of course, in Russia's neighborhood. What are the implications for Moscow?
The implications are enormous because Afghanistan, of course, is in the middle of Eurasia, and unlike the U.S., Russia doesn't have the luxury of getting involved and then flying across an ocean and leaving a problem alone. You just referred on to the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan. And let me just emphasize the difference in the nature of that withdrawal. Your viewers can easily find online the images of General Boris Gromov crossing the famous Friendship Bridge from Afghanistan into Uzbekistan with his son and bouquets of flowers in an ordered column. And what a difference that was, despite the fact that that war was also lost. What a difference that was from General Austin Miller getting onto a plane in the middle of the night. Look, for the Russians, as for all of the countries that have been mentioned so far, including China, of course, that has a border with Afghanistan, the Afghan problem is just beginning. There are two components for the Russians. First of all, of course, terrorism, and the Russians have already moved to take very concrete steps to communicate to the Taliban that if they see any spillover of any kind of activity, either by the Taliban directly or by any groups that the Taliban may support or at least ignore, if any of that spills across the border into the former Central Asian republics, now of course the independent countries, then the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which includes Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan that are immediately involved there, they will respond militarily. However, the Russians have also indicated very clearly that there will be no expeditions into Afghanistan itself. And the other side of the coin, of course, is the economic future of Afghanistan, because the Russians understand perfectly well that without socio-economic rebuilding and stability, Afghanistan is going to be in perpetual instability, and slapping sanctions onto it and trying to sort of punish the Taliban, which will inevitably punish the people of Afghanistan through economic means. This will only foment chaos through poverty, and then, of course, radicalization. So I think while geomilitarily the CSTO will be taking care of keeping the former Soviet territories reasonably safe from terrorists, I think we're going to be looking very closely, everyone's going to be looking very closely at what the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is now going to undertake in terms of rebuilding Afghanistan and integrating it into the greater economies of Central Asia and of Eurasia in general.
Zardasht Shams, Anton Fedyashin just raised some really key points there for Afghanistan, for its future, the economic future of the country, the welfare of its people, and the risks that it faces right now, in that if there is any kind of sanctions imposed in the country, it could lead to further instability, it could lead to further radicalization as well, as Anton pointed out. We know, Zardasht, that Afghanistan needs massive amounts of money. It is a country right now that is dependent on foreign aid. The economy is battered. Up to 14 million people face hunger, severe hunger, and of course now we have a refugee crisis as well. I mean, if you add to that the US threat to block Afghanistan's access to financial markets, and if the Taliban doesn't behave in a way that suits Washington, those are big challenges for this government, and it seems that they don't have too many options, do they?
Yeah, this is a really tough situation for Taliban. Because the almost 10 billion, nearly 10 billion of Afghanistan money has been freezed, assets being freezed by the United States. And in the past years, in the past 20 years, the IMF, World Bank, and other international banks and entities, they were supporting and funding Afghanistan projects, major projects, which were supposed to bring economic development. And Afghanistan showed very rapid development. Like if we compare the Afghanistan of Taliban in 2001, the GDP was around 2.5 billion, and today, last year, it was around 20 billion, so it's jumped 10 times. Similarly, the population almost doubled compared to 2001. So there is a huge responsibility on Taliban. And such threats and such restrictions or bans on Afghan economy will ultimately weaken Taliban. And Taliban would like to avoid these things, and that's why they show more flexibility in statements. And the world and the Afghan people want to see an action from Taliban, how they flexibly move ahead, how they treat their own people, their democratic rights, and also how they establish their relations, diplomatic ties, and how fulfill the demands of international community, particularly neighbors and international powers. So this is a hugely challenging part of the next government.
Victor Gao, over the past few days, the White House has trotted out a whole series of its top officials, including the president, of course, to talk about this withdrawal, to frame it as some kind of accomplishment. But we've also been hearing something else, and that is U.S. officials framing this as some kind of zero-sum game. Here is President Biden speaking at the White House. Let's listen to what he had to say.
There's nothing China or Russia would rather have, would want more in this competition in the United States to be bogged down another decade in Afghanistan.
So President Biden seeing this as a competition, somebody wins, somebody loses. What are your thoughts on that view?
Well, first of all, I think everyone with a decency of mind and objectivity can say that the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan has been a complete fiasco. It's a disaster. And the fact that the United States has left or run away from Afghanistan without leaving behind them a viable framework for national reconciliation and nation building and peace and stability and growth in Afghanistan speaks very loudly to the incompetence and the corruption of whatever that constituted the U.S. administration in Afghanistan. And I think to be defined about the U.S. withdrawal or to apologize for the U.S. withdrawal and pointing fingers in multiple directions, for example, does not solve this fundamental problem of the U.S. failure. Now, President Biden has talked about China competition with the United States. I personally believe there is no competition between China and the United States. What China wants to do is always to improve itself. China's today want to be better than yesterday, and we hope China's tomorrow will be better than today. We are not competing China with the United States or any other country. And I hope President Biden and the U.S. administration will become aware of the fact that we need to follow our own path. We need to deliver bread and butter for our own people. And cooperation between China and the United States is a much better way than a zero-sum game between China and the United States. And as far as stabilizing the situation in Afghanistan is concerned, I hope China and the United States can see things more and more from the same perspective, rather than try to second-guess each other and try to circle back to the other side's rear and to be destructive rather than constructive in terms of building up stability and peace in Afghanistan for the future.
Saeed Khan, CGTN spoke with a Taliban official at Kabul International Airport about the future. This is what he had to say. Let's listen.
Whether it is China or any other country, we want to have excellent relations. They shouldn't interfere in our internal affairs. We want them to be part of humanitarian assistance and have a political presence in Afghanistan as they asked.
So basically, Saeed, what the Taliban official there is saying, hands off Afghanistan, leave us alone. We want to have good relations with everybody. We need to start governing in this country. Is that perhaps an indication that the Taliban is preparing for more moderate policies, policies that will be acceptable to its neighbors, to the rest of the world?
Well, moderate may be the wrong word to examine this through. It may be a word pragmatic. And what we've seen is the Taliban exercising a tremendous level of pragmatism. While it is oftentimes painted as some kind of an ideologically radicalized group, unsophisticated, they have in fact shown quite the contrary, whether it was their negotiations with the Trump administration in Doha, or even the ongoing administration negotiations with Biden. and the United States, and certainly, of course, also with China at very high levels with Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Xinjiang recently. It demonstrates that for the Taliban, they have a far better understanding of geopolitics and looking for the kinds of relationships which will be mutually beneficial. I don't think that Afghanistan deludes itself, and certainly the Taliban doesn't make any kinds of misconceptions that Afghanistan is not geopolitically and geostrategically in a vital neighborhood. They're just simply looking for a situation where the state engineering and the nation building of the United States and the past gives way to something that demonstrates a kind of a mutual respect. Given China's investment in the Belt and Road Initiative and its potential for Afghanistan, given China's investment in CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, as well as its investment package with Iran, the Taliban is certainly signaling that it is open for business, that those kinds of relationships, which are not one seen as encroachment, not one seen as cultural or political imperialism, are ones that then create a good environment for Afghanistan and for those who want to treat the Taliban regime on equal footing.
Zardasht Shams, how do you see that? As Saeed Khan pointed out there, we could see a Taliban that is perhaps more pragmatic, less driven by religious dogma or ideology. How do you think they would rule in that way? How do you see it? Zardasht Shams, did you hear me?
Sorry. Yeah. No. We see quite a lot of changes in Taliban behavior. Although I might be somehow agree to the pragmatic, but at least they have changed. They have transformed. Still, we have to see, because the information that are coming from inside Taliban is, one is the military side, the other is the political or the diplomatic side, which were leading the negotiations at Doha. There are still differences because the political leadership are more convincing the military one to behave or to accommodate other Afghans and also with the rest of the world. But still there is a struggle going on. But so far we see that political leadership is overcoming, and that's a very positive development.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. We have run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. I'm Anton Fedyashin in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.